Hey everyone, this is Hill from Destination Thrills, and today we have the results from our first ever Manufacturers Cup that we've done here on the channel. This was a very unique tournament because typically we focus on specific coasters or a specific park, but today we're focusing on the manufacturers. Which coaster manufacturer do you, the fans, like the most? And I'll tell you what, there was definitely some opinions out there and there was some close battles. So we'll get all into that in just a moment. But first, I just want to thank everyone who's been participating lately in these tournaments. They've been so much fun to do, and I just have noticed that the participation continues to climb. So I just want to thank you all for that. If you have not participated in one of our battles and want to in the future, then go ahead and like our Instagram channel at Destination Thrills. I'll also have a link in the description below, but that is where we post all the tournament information as well as the brackets, and that's where the voting happens, is in our story. Yes, I've had requests to move the voting to YouTube, and I'm looking into that and maybe doing that soon, but for right now, Instagram just seems to be where I attract a lot of the participants, so I'm going to be keeping it there for the time being. All right, let's get into the rules of this tournament. We had 16 coaster manufacturers. Now, the manufacturers themselves does not have to be in business right now. They just have to have coasters that are currently operating. These 16 manufacturers were put in a bracket, and they would have head-to-head matches in a single elimination bracket. And the coaster manufacturer that makes it all the way to the end without losing is our victor. I will also be doing a consolation bracket that I always do, and that will be for those that lose in the final 8 rounds. Now, how the battles worked is I posted the head-to-head match on my Instagram story, and the manufacturer with the most votes would win. It's a pretty simple concept for you. I try to keep these as simple as possible to keep them very entertaining and fun, and this one was definitely entertaining. So I don't want to stall any longer. Let's get into the results. Let's start out by looking at the bracket here for the Coaster Manufacturers Cup. And on the top left, we have the #1 seed, RMC, Rocky Mountain Construction. RMC just had a great decade when they really just came onto the scene, and they have been blowing our minds with some great coasters. So I felt that it was fair to give it the #1 seed. Our #2 seeded manufacturer in the bottom right is Intamin. On the top right, we have Bollinger and Mabliard. And on the bottom left, we had Great Coasters International, the #4 seed. The other seeds were Mack Rides at #5, Gravity Group at #6, Vekoma at #7, and Gerstlauer at #8. And then the rest of the manufacturers filled in the rest of the spots. And we've got some really good matchups to start out here. I mean, Gerstlauer versus Premier Rides, I expect that to be close. And S&S versus Gravity Group. Let's see if they were close. Let's get into these first round results. All right, in our first round, we had RMC versus Mauer. I don't expect Mauer to really do well in this matchup just because RMC right now is so good. They have so many good coasters, but there's not a lot of Mauer coasters in the US that people know about or are really high ranking. So, you know, I expect RMC to do well in this one. I personally would prefer RMC, though I have never been on a Mauer coaster yet. Let's see who won, and it's RMC with 95% of the votes. All right, moving on to the next round, we have Premier Rides versus Gerstlauer. Premier Rides has also come on the scene and started making some more coasters, especially here in the US. I think of Icebreaker that they're just putting in right now. Also West Coast Racers that was just installed in Six Flags Magic Mountain. They also have Full Throttle over there. There's so many good launch coasters that they're making. They've really upped their game. They also made Mr. Freeze at my home park, which I absolutely love. So Premier Rides, I think, is a great manufacturer, though Gerstlauer, I've just started to ride some of their coasters as well. I really like the trains that they use, those compact trains. I think it allows you to do some really fun elements and some really tight-shaped maneuvers. I'm thinking of Monster at Adventureland and how much fun I had on that coaster. I want to ride more Gerstlauer coasters, and this one would be tough for me. I might just give the edge to Gerstlauer here, in my opinion, though I'm not sure what you guys are going to pick. This could be a wide open matchup. So let's get to the results here. The winner versus Premier Rides and Gerstlauer is Gerstlauer with 56% of the vote, so a narrow victory here, and Gerstlauer is moving on to the next round. Next off, we have Schwarzkopf versus Mack Rides. You know, I've been on one Schwarzkopf coaster, and that was Shockwave at Six Flags Over Texas. Mack Rides, to me, I just absolutely love Time Traveler, and that's the one Mack Rides coaster that really stands out to me that I've been on. And I think there's also such a bright future with this company that I think Mack Rides here, just because it's more modern, is going to have the edge. And Mack Rides does win with 78% of the vote, beating out Schwarzkopf. Next up, we have Chance Morgan versus Great Coasters. I will say The one thing I like about Chance Morgan is that they have that Hyper GTX model with Lightning Run. I love Lightning Run so much, but Great Coasters International, if you're looking for a solid modern wooden coaster, Great Coasters International is the manufacturer to go to. I mean, you think of Mystic Timbers, American Thunder at Six Flags St. Louis, Prowler at Worlds of Fun, just so many good coasters, and they're going to be coming out with some more soon, hopefully. So for me, Great Coasters International, I would say, is a better manufacturer. Plus, I love wooden coasters, so a little bias there. I think Great Coasters International, though, will also be moving on from you, the voters. And GCI does win with 79% of the vote. So GCI moving on to the second round. Next up, we have B&M Bollinger and Mabillard versus CCI Custom Coasters International. Now, Custom Coasters International doesn't make any coasters anymore, but they're known for rides like the Legend at Holiday World and my personal favorite, the Boss at Six Flags St. Louis. Now, the one problem that CCI has is that they have a reputation for some really rough wooden coasters, and that's where I think B&M will have the upper hand. B&M is known for the smooth steel roller coaster rides, and they have a ton of coasters. They're very popular amongst parks, and what we'll find out in this tournament is how popular they are amongst the fans. I think in this battle, B&M has the upper hand here, and let's see who wins. And it's B&M with a wipeout, 92% of the vote going to B&M. All right, next up, we have another one that I expected to be tight, and that was SNS versus Gravity Group. SNS also has blown up just recently with their 40 free spin models, which I think are absolutely excellent. But then you also have coasters like Max Force and Steel Curtain. Plus, they did unveil a new model that they haven't built yet. That is the Access Coaster, and that is so exciting. I really hope somebody buys them here in the US because I'd love to get a ride on the Access Coaster. So that might give it the edge here, but Gravity Group is also known for making some good wooden coasters. I think of the Voyage, which is my favorite coaster. If you checked out my last video of ranking my top 15, check it out in the card above. But that is my #1 coaster, and that is made from Gravity Group. Also, Gravity Group has some really good coasters overseas. So if I have a lot of overseas voters, I may get some pull from Gravity Group here, but I think SNS is gonna come out with a slight victory. And it does with 52% of the vote. So SNS just barely beating out Gravity Group for the win here and moving on to the top 8. Next up, we have Vekoma versus PTC, some really traditional classic manufacturers here. Vekoma, usually famous for the wrong reasons, but they have really turned their reputation around. So it'll be interesting to see how far they've turned their reputation around, which will be played out in the votes here. If Vekoma gets a lot of votes, then maybe they have truly changed their perception in the coaster community. But PTC, a classic here. I think of a lot of the great wooden coasters that they've made as well that I've been on. I absolutely love them. They have a classic feel, though I will say with Vekoma, the new coasters they're making right now look fantastic. So that might give them the edge here. Let's see who wins. And it is Vekoma with 78% of the vote. All right, moving on to the next battle, we have Aero versus Intamin. Poor Aero here. It's got to go up against another super popular manufacturer known for some super popular rides. Think Millennium Force, think Maverick at Cedar Point, and Skyrush, and just many more coasters overseas like Expedition G-Force, all made by Intamin. Plus, we got the new Velocicoaster made by Intamin coming to Universal Studios in Orlando. That's exciting as well. Intamin here is gonna have a good run in this tournament, and I think it's just gonna easily blow by Aero. And it does with 87% of the vote. Intamin moving on to the second round. All right, let's get to our final 8 here. And we have RMC versus Gerstlauer. Like I mentioned, RMC has a lot of hype right now, so I don't see it losing here to Gerstlauer. Personally, I would pick RMC as well. Like, my top 5 is filled with 3 RMCs. So that just goes to tell you I'm a little bit biased toward RMC, but every coaster I've been on from them, I have loved. So I expect them to go pretty far here. And the winner between RMC and Gerstlauer is RMC with 91% of the vote, moving on to the next round. Next up, we have Mack Rides versus Great Coasters International. This was so tough for me because I really love both manufacturers. Personally, I would go with GCI just because I've been on more of their coasters and they're just very consistent for having a very great low to the ground wooden coaster, a very good modern coaster, and most of their rides are smooth as well. I know some people who have been on Thunderhead will be like, what are you talking about? But most of the rides are fairly smooth. And then you have Mack Rides with Time Traveler. Again, personally, I would pick Great Coasters International. Not sure what you, the fans, are going to vote here, but let's see who wins. And we have Mack Rides with 57% of the vote, so Mack Rides moving on, taking out Great Coasters International. Next up, we have B&M and S&S. B&M is just such a reliable manufacturer. They have so many coasters out there, especially in the US. They have so many coasters. They have so many good coaster models. S&S has been around for a while, but they just really started blowing up recently with some better coasters. I think B&M, though, with its tradition and just always being reliable and making solid coasters, I think they're going to have the upper hand in this matchup. And so the winner between B&M and S&S is B&M with 90% of the vote. That is a huge total and could be a great sign as it gets into the semifinals, because it's going to need a lot of momentum if it's going to get past manufacturers that may be in there like Intamin and RMC. Speaking of Intamin, we have Intamin versus Vekoma. Again, I expect Intamin to do very well in this tournament just from, reading my DMs. I've seen a lot of support for both Intamin and RMC, so no reason to believe Intamin gets stopped here. Personally, I would pick Intamin. This is a pretty easy choice for me, Intamin. But again, with Vekoma, as they make more coaster models, could definitely be one in contention for winning this cup in the future. So let's see who won, and it's Intamin with 87% of the vote, and moving on to take on B&M. That's going to be a really good matchup, a battle of the top steel coaster manufacturers in the world. All right, so now we have our semifinal set. We have Mack Rides versus RMC on the left side, and then we have B&M versus Intamin on the right side. These are going to be some great matches. I'm excited to get to those results. We also have the Consolation Bracket, which will feature Gerstlauer versus Great Coasters International, and S&S versus Vekoma. Those will be some really spicy battles, and let's get right to them now. Starting with Gerstlauer and Great Coasters International. For me, it would be GCI, but to me, this is a toss-up on what you guys are going to choose. I think a lot more international viewers will probably go with Gerstlauer, because Gerstlauers are more in Europe and other places, whereas Great Coasters International, I think, has a great reputation from coaster enthusiasts here in the US, so that might give them the edge here. All right, so the winner between GCI and Gerstlauer is GCI with 62% of the vote. And moving on to the 5th place matchup, Gerstlauer will be featured in the 7th place match. Next up, we have S&S versus Vekoma. I expect this to be a really tight one. I mean, who do you go with here? You got Vekoma with some great new rides and S&S with some great new rides as well. Again, because I haven't been on the new gen Vekomas, I'm going S&S here, but I could see a lot of our viewers going with Vekoma, and the winner is Vekoma with 55% of the vote, so a really tight margin of victory here, and Vekoma will be in our 5th place matchup. S&S will be featured in our 7th place battle. All right, let's move on to the semifinals. We have RMC versus Mack Rides here. This could be close. I do think I would favor RMC in this matchup, but Mack Rides, again, has a lot of new coasters, especially with Copperhead Strike just being built in Carowinds. That may bring some influence to Mack Rides in this scenario, but RMC, I don't know. I think RMC wins this one. And the results are RMC wins with 88% of the vote. So RMC will be in our championship matchup. No surprise there. Mack Rides will be battling out for 3rd place. Next up, we have probably the best semifinal matchup we have, B&M versus Intamin. So it's kind of like, what do you want to vote here? Do you want the smooth, reliable manufacturers that doesn't take very many risks? Or if you have Intamin, which is just like the big risk taker, they always are trying to push the boundaries, do new things, come up with new concepts. They're very aggressive with their style of coaster. I think fans love the manufacturer that's going to push the boundaries, even though from a park perspective, maybe you want the more safer investment. I think Intamin is popular with fans because they have been known to really break the barriers and to introduce new coaster types and take coasters beyond what they are currently. So the winner between Intamin and B&M is Intamin with 60% of the vote. So it will be Intamin versus RMC in our championship. That's going to be a treat. And then we also have B&M versus Mack Rides. We shouldn't overlook this battle. This could be a close one as well. All right, we are in our final rounds. We have the 7th place matchup, which is Gerstlauer versus S&S. I don't know who's gonna win this one. Personally, I would probably go with Gerstlauer just because I love monsters so much. But I think if I ride more S&Ss, I will probably like that as well. So I pick Gerstlauer, but let's see what you pick. And Gerstlauer wins with 55% of the votes. So that is such a close margin of victory. But Gerstlauer will take 7th place in the Manufacturers Cup. All right, next, our 5th place battle. We have GCI versus Vekoma. These manufacturers are very different from one another. One builds some really good wooden coasters. The other one is a historic steel coaster manufacturer that has really, again, been turning around their reputation. Let's see how far Vekoma has turned around their reputation. Can it take down GCI? Let's see here. Our winner is for 5th place, GCI with 59% of the vote. So GCI wins our 5th place battle, and Vekoma will have to settle for 6th place. All right, next up we have our 3rd place matchup. We have Mack Rides versus B&M. This could be a really close one here. Mack Rides has some really interesting coaster models, especially the Extreme Spinner. That is just such a huge hit. And then you have B&M, the top dog when it comes to manufacturers as far as reliable coasters. They've just been the gold standard. Let's see if the fans appreciate that enough to vote B&M as the winner of 3rd place. And the winner is, wow, this is shocking, B&M with 80% of the vote. So an absolute wipeout of Mack Rides in the 3rd place matchup. So B&M takes 3rd place. What a big victory there. And so congratulations for B&M to taking 3rd place. Mack Rides will be 4th place in the Manufacturers Cup. All right, we have the battle we've all been waiting for. From the beginning, the reason why I had these seated as number 1 and 2 is because this is a championship that I figured we would see. RMC versus Intamin. Both manufacturers are very aggressive. They've both brought in some of the craziest elements that we can experience on coasters. I think of Intamin and the Stangle Dive and just their crazy ejector airtime moments. I think of RMC and the zero-G stall and just some of the weird inversions that they have brought to us. And these coaster manufacturers are just always pushing the limits. It's just so fun to ride their coasters. A lot of their coasters are in the top for good reason. I really don't know who you're gonna pick. I think this is gonna be one of the tightest battles, but let's finally see. I have not seen this result either, but let's finally see who won between RMC and Intamin. So the winner of the Manufacturers Cup is RMC with 54% of the vote, so a tight margin. I'll get the final vote count here for you. It was 415 votes for RMC and 357 votes for Intamin. So wow, a pretty close battle there, but RMC with the victory, and RMC is the winner of our first ever Manufacturers Cup here in 2020. Congratulations to Rocky Mountain Construction for that victory, and also congratulations to Intamin making it all the way to 2nd place. I don't think that should be overlooked at all. So what another phenomenal tournament. We definitely have more coming. I just want to thank everyone who participated. Again, we had over 750 participants for this tournament, and man, it's just so cool to see all the votes come in and just how much you guys care and participate and get involved with these tournaments. I get DMs all the time about them, and so it's just really fun to do these for you all, and I'm excited for the coaster tournaments that we have coming up in the future. And trust me, 2021 will have a good amount of tournaments. So I'll be announcing the next tournament on Instagram very soon, so again, check us out there. And if you haven't, subscribed to Destination Thrills, as we are the destination for all the latest theme park news, coaster battles, and content. If you want to see more coaster tournaments, I will link the playlist in the description below, along with our last tournament, the B&M Invert Coaster Tournament, in the card above. Thank you so much for watching this video. Everyone stay safe out there, and have a good one.